All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 23, Episode 6, titled Flying Solo. Now, sometimes I wonder about the minds behind this show. Like, what were they thinking? The whole premise of the episode feels like it was born out of a fever dream after a late-night binge of airport dramas, and maybe, just maybe, a bad batch of takeout. It's a real head-scratcher, and it's precisely that kind of chaotic energy that makes us love this show, right? We get these wildly ambitious, often nonsensical plots that somehow, miraculously, tie back to the core of who these characters are. And this episode, it really pushes the boundaries of what we expect, taking us on a journey that's both familiar and utterly bizarre. We're going to dive deep into what makes this episode tick, or maybe sputter and cough, because that's kind of the vibe here. We'll look at the characters, the jokes that landed, and the ones that went down in flames faster than a faulty 747. We're going to dissect it all, the good, the bad, and the downright baffling, because that's what we do. We're going to find out if this episode is a smooth landing or if it's more of a controlled crash. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly where this episode stands in the grand, glorious, messed-up tapestry of the Griffins. What we're going to see in this episode is a perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take a seemingly simple idea and twist it into something completely unexpected. Something that feels both like a classic Griffin family mishap and a bold new direction. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up because this is not going to be a typical smooth flight. And hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure to hit that subscribe button, so you don't miss out on any future breakdowns, especially the ones where we have to explain how Peter Griffin ended up in charge of a nuclear submarine. It's a pretty frequent occurrence, honestly. So this episode, Flying Solo, on the surface, it's all about Brian and Quagmire getting deeply, obsessively involved in flight simulation games. And naturally, because this is Family Guy, it escalates from a quirky hobby into a full-blown crisis that affects the entire family and even their friends. The main story really centers around Brian's newfound passion, or rather obsession with flying planes, fueled by a video game. He's convinced he's a natural, and this leads him to enroll in flight school. Meanwhile, Quagmire, in his own unique way, gets sucked into the same vortex of aviation, though his motivations are, shall we say, more Quagmire-ish.
The show attempts to parallel their experiences with Peter's struggles with screen time limits at home, a plot that feels a little tacked on but serves its purpose in highlighting the family's disconnect. What's really going on underneath, though, is a commentary on aspiration, skill, and the often blurry line between hobby and delusion. It's about how people can get so caught up in something they love, or something they think they're good at, that they lose sight of reality, and how that affects everyone around them. Brian, in his usual self-important way, believes he's discovered his true calling, ready to ditch his writing career for the cockpit. Quagmire, on the other hand, seems to be chasing a thrill, a way to prove himself in a world where his usual proclivities aren't quite enough. The episode doesn't shy away from the absurdity of it all, but it also manages to sneak in a few moments of genuine character insight, or at least the show's version of it. The writing, at times, feels a little uneven. Some jokes land with the precision of a landing gear deployment, while others feel like they're in a holding pattern, never quite reaching their destination. The pacing can be a bit erratic, jumping from Brian's dramatic pronouncements to Peter's mundane domestic squabbles without a clear narrative glue. It feels like 2 or 3 separate episode ideas were mashed together, and while some of the resulting collisions are hilarious, others just feel awkward. Visually, there are some fun moments, particularly with the flight simulator sequences, which are clearly meant to mimic real-deal flight sims, and that's a nice touch. The animation team really leaned into the aerial action, and it's appreciated. But overall, this episode sits in a peculiar spot. It's not a groundbreaking episode, nor is it a complete disaster. It's more of a serviceable distraction. It delivers the expected Family Guy chaos, but it doesn't necessarily offer anything profoundly new or memorable. It's the kind of episode you'll watch, laugh at a few parts, forget most of it by the next day, and then vaguely remember when someone brings up planes or diarrhea sinks. My personal verdict? It's a mid-tier episode. It does its job, it entertains for the most part, but it doesn't leave a lasting impression. It's like eating a decent sandwich. It fills you up, it's fine, but you're not going to rave about it for weeks. It's definitely not peak Family Guy, but it's also not the worst thing they've ever put on air.
It's just there. And sometimes, for a show that's been on this long, just being there in a somewhat funny way is enough, I guess. But it leaves you yearning for those episodes that really stick with you, the ones that make you think, or at least make you laugh until you cry. This one's more of a mild chuckle. Let's break down some of the most memorable, or perhaps the most bewildering moments. First up, the opening song.
Classic Family Guy. It's a full-on parody of the It Seems Today song, but instead of actual values, it's all about violence and sex on TV. It sets the tone, right? It's like, here we go again, folks. Same old Family Guy, but with a slightly more cynical twist. It's a fun little intro, a way to get the audience settled and reminded of the show's brand of humor. Then we have the Jack Ryan bit. It's a quick jab at the show, highlighting a moment where a drone strike goes wrong and hits a hospital. The joke, of course, is about the actor and his perceived smirking habit. It's a typical Family Guy cutaway, referencing a popular show in a completely unexpected context. The dialogue here is what makes it funny. What are you doing? 6 people died. And then the punchline, a meta-commentary on the character's hair. It's clever in its silliness, reminding us that the show doesn't take itself seriously, not even when referencing real-world tragedies or popular dramas. The setup is brilliant in its quickness. They establish a serious situation, then pivot to a ridiculous observational joke about the actor's appearance. It's a hallmark of their humor, finding the most mundane or superficial aspect of something and blowing it up. Then there's Peter's screen time limit situation. Lois is trying to enforce some parental control, and Peter is absolutely losing his mind about it. The app cuts the power to the TV, and Peter's reaction is pure Peter. He's trying to land a 757 in Dubai with a crosswind and a broken landing gear. I mean, who does that? It's the absurdity of the situation that sells it. He's not just stuck without TV, he's performing the most high-stakes imaginary scenario possible to combat his boredom. The humor comes from the juxtaposition of his childish tantrum with the simulated danger he's creating in his head. And the fact that he blames the app when it's literally his own wife enforcing rules is classic Peter. He never takes responsibility. Now, Brian's flight simulator game, he's not just playing, he's amazing at it. He landed in Texas and dropped a "Houston, we don't have a problem" line, except he apparently forgot the city. The joke, of course, is that he's so full of himself and trying to be clever, but it backfires because he can't even remember the punchline properly. It's a classic Brian move, always trying to sound smarter and more profound than he actually is. The reaction of the other characters, especially Peter's confused, What was the city?" perfectly highlights the ridiculousness of Brian's brag. It shows Brian's delusion and the general family's tolerance, or rather, exasperation, with his intellectual posturing. The self-awareness from Lois, "Oh, I can't even look at screens over shoulders," is a nice touch too, showing how everyone is affected by these little domestic dramas. And then the closet organization. Peter is going through his junk and he finds packaging from every Apple product. This is so relatable, right? That compulsion to keep things because they look nice. He's got Apple boxes piled up, and then he finds Lois's old Easy-Bake Oven. Peter's reaction, "If it's not big enough for you to stick your head in, I have no interest," is peak Peter. It's gross, it's inappropriate, and it's hilarious. It highlights his childish nature and his complete lack of filter. Stewie, of course, has a completely different reaction. He's excited, he wants to play with it. He sees it as a toy from the past. But then he insults his grandma, calling her toys stupid garbage girl toys from the 1940s. Ouch. This scene shows the generational divide and the differing perspectives on play and gender roles. Stewie's love for trucks and dinosaurs versus his initial disdain for the Easy-Bake Oven really sets up his later obsession. And the "Rupert, I've always wanted an Easy-Bake Oven" line, right after trashing it, is pure Stewie. He's impulsive, he's easily swayed by his own desires, and he's utterly devoted to Rupert. And the Caillou finale comparison? Chef's kiss. It's that perfect blend of childlike innocence and dark humor that makes Stewie so great. Next, we have Joe and Bonnie. Joe's phone is in the pool because Bonnie threw it in there after he asked her why she looked so tired. This is a classic portrayal of marital friction, a little domestic spat blown up for comedic effect. The dialogue is sharp, Joe's mild accusation, Bonnie's explosive reaction. It's the sort of thing that happens in relationships, but Family Guy exaggerates it to a ridiculous degree. It's a funny, quick gag that establishes the character's dynamic. Then Quagmire, the pilot, enters Brian's world.
He's talking about knots and crosswinds, and Brian is all smug about his simulator skills. Quagmire, initially dismissive, then reveals he's been playing the same game and is now a master. This is where the core conflict of the episode really solidifies. Brian, the self-proclaimed intellectual, is challenged by Quagmire, the unexpected aviation prodigy. The humor lies in the reversal of expectations and Quagmire's typically crude explanation of how easy he finds it.
Brian's reaction to Quagmire acknowledging his expertise is priceless, a mix of disbelief and annoyance. The episode takes this rivalry and runs with it, showing how Brian's ego can't handle being upstaged by Quagmire of all people. Stewie's pizza-making scene. He's making pizza for Rupert, and it's apparently amazing. This leads to a whole discussion about authentic pizza places, like Caserta's in Arturo's and Mr. Di Petrillo. It's a deep cut for anyone who knows their pizza. The joke here is that Brian, the supposed foodie and intellectual, has never had the best pizza, while Stewie, the child prodigy, is a culinary genius. Brian's dismissive attitude towards Stewie's pizza, only to be blown away, is a classic setup for Brian's eventual humiliation. The escalating pizza debate is a great way to showcase the characters' personalities and their knowledge, or lack thereof. Brian's condescending tone about Rupert being a basic little bitch who shops at Filene's, only for Stewie's pizza to be revealed as superior, is a perfect character moment. The whole idea of Stewie and Brian opening a boutique pizza place for a Michelin star is peak Stewie ambition. He wants that validation, and who doesn't want to be recognized for their culinary skills, especially by a tire company? It's a hilarious aspiration that highlights Stewie's drive for excellence in any field he chooses. Back at the airport, Brian is trying to get into the cockpit, claiming he's qualified. The joke about pilots leaving the door open is a classic observation that many have probably made. And then the bomb drops. Brian has enrolled in flight training at Huffman Aviation. The punchline is, of course, the connection to 9/11 hijackers. It's dark, it's controversial, and it's classic Family Guy. The "I just used a coupon" line is the ultimate nonchalant dismissal of the seriousness of the situation. This is where the episode really escalates its stakes, pushing Brian's obsession to a dangerous extreme. The implication that he's training at the same place as terrorists is a shocking and typical Family Guy move to create controversy and humor.
Then we have the commercial airliner scene, and Quagmire is on it, and he's clearly not feeling well. The food poisoning, the jokes about the funny-tasting shrimp, it all builds up to a massive, explosive situation. Quagmire's breakdown is a physical comedy masterclass. The dialogue about his impending situation is hilariously crude. He's desperately trying to hold it together, but it's coming out. The part where he yells, "I'm gonna have to take a boy band," and then explains "In Sync" and 98 Degrees and One Direction is peak Quagmire. It's his signature brand of vulgar, yet somehow still funny, wordplay. The urgency and desperation in his voice make it even funnier. Brian's insistence on taking over the controls, despite not being qualified, sets up a major plot point. Quagmire's panicked, "No, Brian, don't you touch anything," is a desperate plea that foreshadows the disaster to come. Brian, ever the hero in his own mind, thinks he can handle it, which is of course the worst possible scenario. And Brian actually lands the plane. He lands it in Orlando, and the landing is surprisingly smooth. The other passengers are complaining about their TVs not working, and then suddenly they're working again. It's a moment of triumph for Brian, but it's overshadowed by the announcement that some passengers have a short turnaround to meet their drug dealers. It's a classic Family Guy twist, turning a moment of heroism into something seedy. The juxtaposition of Brian's supposed accomplishment with the reality of the passengers' destinations is a typical cynical punchline. The keys to the city ceremony is a great visual gag, with the giant scissors and the mayor's speech about junk drawer things. It's a satirical take on award ceremonies and the often meaningless nature of accolades. Tom Tucker's interview with Brian and Quagmire is a masterclass in awkward journalism. Tom's questions are nonsensical, asking about comfortable weather and a producer calling it comfortable. It's a funny way to satirize local news reporting and the sometimes absurdity of their interview questions. Quagmire's deadpan response, "Could have brought a coat, Tom, I'm not your mother," is a perfect character moment, highlighting his gruff personality. Then we get to the airline's press tour offer. Brian is all for it, wanting the PR, while Quagmire is hesitant, probably remembering the whole diarrhea incident. The airline needs this for PR after their recent incident involving a baby and a toilet flush.
This is classic Family Guy, referencing past events and creating a new scandal out of thin air. The idea of them going on a press tour together, despite Quagmire's recent humiliation, is ripe for comedic disaster. Brian's comment about Pete Davidson's love life is a random but relevant pop culture reference. Stewie's Pizza Restaurant is a massive success. The lines are huge, people are calling it a pop-up and going crazy for it. The joke about white people going crazy for pop-ups is a bit of a stereotype, but it's funny. The customers mentioning seeing the place on Facebook, TikTok, and Parade magazine shows how quickly social media and influencer culture can propel a business. The exchange about slices versus whole pizzas and scanning QR codes highlights the modern restaurant experience. Then the Domino's jab. We meet the legal definition of pizza. It's a diss at a major chain, implying their pizza is barely pizza. It's a bold statement and a classic Family Guy move to pick on well-known entities. The second part of the press tour interview is on Good Morning Akron. The question is about how they prepare for emergencies, and Brian, predictably, talks about training. Quagmire, still mortified, describes it as pure gut instinct. The gag here is that Brian's experience is from an iPad app that costs $2.99, and Quagmire's experience is tainted by, well, the sink incident. The reference to getting the app for free but sitting through ads for the Army is a nice touch. Then we have the airline commercial. They're forced into it, and Brian plays the hero, while Quagmire is branded as the guy who pooped in the sink. The slogan, "If you're looking to buy a car, you want to make a smooth landing, not take a dump in the sink," is incredibly embarrassing for Quagmire. He's furious, and Brian's obliviousness to the damage he's causing is infuriating. Quagmire's military service and dreams of a Sully Sullenberger moment are shattered by this humiliating ad. He feels like a punchline, not a hero. Brian's inability to grasp the gravity of the situation and his focus on his own hero status makes Quagmire's anger even more justified. The fact that Googling Quagmire brings up pictures of him and George Brett is a hilarious and specific visual gag that perfectly encapsulates his predicament. Quagmire quits the press tour and, more importantly, quits being a pilot. This is a major character moment for Quagmire, showing how deeply the humiliation has affected him. Back at Stewie's, Dave Portnoy, the pizza kingmaker, is coming to review their restaurant. This is a huge moment for Stewie and Chris, who's somehow involved. The fear of him wanting it extra crispy sets up another potential disaster. The realization that the Easy-Bake Oven bulb is burned out is a critical plot point. It's a custom bulb from the 1960s, 200 watts, 40% lead. This is where the episode gets really absurd. They need this specific ancient bulb. And who do they find? Jesse and Arnie. This whole interaction feels a little random, like they needed someone to deliver the bulb. But it does lead to the airline ad, which is another layer of humiliation for Quagmire. The ad itself is ridiculous. If you're looking to buy a car, you want to make a smooth landing, not take a dump in the sink. It's a brilliant callback and a devastating insult to Quagmire's pride. The ad is a testament to the show's ability to revisit past jokes and make them even more painful, especially for the characters involved. The final scenes tie everything together. Brian is still on the press tour, and Quagmire is trying to take over. The pilot who pooped in the sink is now a hero for stepping up. It's a twisted narrative, but typical of the show. Brian's explanation of diarrhea noises is hilariously gross. And then, the Easy-Bake Oven saga comes to its climax. Chris is freaking out about the bulb, and Stewie, ever the resourceful one, has a plan. The interaction with Jesse and Arnie feels a bit like a plot device, but it serves its purpose in getting the bulb. The airline ad is the ultimate low point for Quagmire. He's being portrayed as a man who pooped in a sink, and Brian is the hero who landed the plane. It's a complete betrayal of their friendship and a devastating blow to Quagmire's career and reputation. The fact that he's contractually obligated to be part of this is the ultimate cruel joke. The scene where Quagmire confronts Mr. Brockner about the ad is powerful. He talks about his military service, his dreams of a Sully Sullenberger moment, and how he's now the punchline. The image of him and George Brett in a Google search for diarrhea is a perfect visual representation of his despair. And his decision to quit being a pilot? That's a huge character arc, showing how much this has broken him. The episode ends with a lot of loose ends, as Family Guy often does. Brian is still a hero. Quagmire is, well, he's contemplating his life choices, and Stewie is trying to get a Michelin star. Let's check in on our main players. Brian, our canine narrator and aspiring intellectual, is, well, he's Brian. In this episode, he's all about his newfound passion for flying. He's convinced he's a natural, a prodigy who's just discovered his true calling. His ego is through the roof, and he's constantly trying to one-up everyone, especially Quagmire. His best moment? Probably landing the plane, even if it was by accident or sheer luck. It plays into his self-image as a hero. His worst moment? Honestly, the entire press tour and the airline ad. Being associated with that humiliating commercial and the fact that he's the star while Quagmire is the butt of the joke is pretty low, even for Brian. Does it change how I see him? Not really. He's still the same self-righteous, often clueless dog we've come to know. His role here really reinforces the idea that he thinks he's smarter than everyone. And sometimes he gets lucky, but usually he just ends up making things worse for others. His story in this episode, especially him enrolling in flight school, suggests that the show might be exploring his impulsive decisions and his constant search for a new identity or purpose. It's a pattern with Brian. Quagmire, our favorite perverted pilot, is definitely put through the ringer in this episode. He starts off as a confident pilot, someone who knows his stuff, and ends up as the poster boy for a very unfortunate bodily incident. His best moment is easily his in-air breakdown. It's a masterclass in physical comedy and crude wordplay. Classic Quagmire. His worst moment is without a doubt the airline ad. Being portrayed as someone who pooped in the sink, especially when he's dreamed of being a hero pilot, is a devastating blow. Does it change how I see him? It makes me feel a little bad for him, which is rare. Seeing him so utterly humiliated and questioning his entire career is a genuinely sad, albeit funny, moment. His role here shows the show's willingness to push characters to their absolute lowest for a laugh, but it also hints at the emotional consequences. His story about quitting piloting is a significant development, suggesting he might be heading down a different path, or at least a path where he's not constantly associated with his plumbing issues. Peter Griffin, the lovable oaf, is mostly on the sidelines here, dealing with screen time limits. His best moment is his elaborate fantasy of landing a 757 while grounded. It's pure Peter, escapism at its finest. His worst moment? Honestly, his overall lack of involvement in the main plot. He's just there to be a comedic foil for the kids' issues. Does it change how I see him? No, he's consistently Peter. His role in this episode, while minor, highlights the family dynamic and how even the mundane domestic issues can be exaggerated for laughs. It sets up Brian and Quagmire's outlandish adventure against the backdrop of a somewhat normal, albeit Griffin normal, family life. Lois Griffin, the voice of reason, is stuck dealing with Peter's tantrum and the general chaos. Her best moment is her exasperated, "Oh, I can't even look at screens," over shoulders. It perfectly captures her daily struggle. Her worst moment is, well, there aren't many standout Lois moments here. She's more of a reactive character. Does it change how I see her? No, she's the anchor of the family, constantly trying to keep things from completely falling apart. Her role here is to provide a contrast to the wildness of Peter and the kids. Stewie Griffin, the diabolical genius toddler, gets a pretty significant subplot. His excitement for the Easy-Bake Oven and his ambition to open a pizza place are his highlights. His worst moment is arguably when he insults his grandma's toys, though his ambition for a Michelin star is pretty funny in its own right. Does it change how I see him? It shows his versatility, his ability to pivot from world domination to culinary dreams. His role here is crucial for the subplot and provides a good counterpoint to Brian's aerial ambitions. Chris Griffin, well, he's Chris. He's mostly there for reactions and to be the slightly less intelligent sidekick to Stewie. His best moment is probably his concern over the Easy-Bake Oven bulb. His worst moment is just being Chris, I guess. He's not given much to do. Does it change how I see him? He remains the lovable, dim-witted older brother. His role here is to be part of Stewie's subplot, offering simple observations and occasionally getting caught up in the chaos. Let's dig into the nooks and crannies, the stuff you might have missed while you were busy laughing or recoiling. First off, that Jack Ryan cutaway. The actor being mocked for his hair, the quick jab at a serious drama, it's a classic Family Guy move to find the most mundane thing to poke fun at. It's not just about the show, it's about how we perceive actors and their on-screen personas. The fact that they bring up "smirked" a lot is a subtle nod to Steve Carell's Michael Scott persona from The Office, adding another layer of meta-commentary on the actor's career. Then there's Stewie's obsession with the Easy-Bake Oven. The specific details about it being a 1940s girl toy and Stewie's initial disdain, followed by his sudden, overwhelming desire, is a commentary on how we sometimes dismiss things only to fall in love with them later, especially when they're presented as rare or valuable. The fact that it's a custom bulb from the 1960s with 40% lead is a deeply ridiculous detail that adds to the absurdity of their quest. It's not just about needing a light bulb, it's about needing a ridiculously specific, ancient, potentially hazardous one. It's the kind of specificity that makes Family Guy humor work. Moving on, the joke about Jerome's recycled paper goods, followed by Joe explaining Bonnie through his phone in the pool. This is a quick, blink-and-you'll-miss-it gag that sets up the marital tension between Joe and Bonnie without much dialogue. It's a subtle nod to the everyday annoyances and explosions that happen in relationships, framed in a very Family Guy way. And Quagmire's initial dismissiveness of Brian's flight sim game, only to admit he's crushing it himself. This sets up their rivalry and also makes fun of how easily people can get sucked into these immersive games, blurring the lines between virtual and real-world skills. It shows how shared hobbies can turn into competitive arenas, especially between these two. The whole pizza subplot with Stewie is a masterclass in specific pop culture references. The mention of Casertas, Arturos, and Depatrillos, and Mr. Depatrillo being from Sicily and making dough by hand, is a nod to the authentic Italian pizza scene. It's not just a general pizza joke, it's about appreciating artisanal craftsmanship. Stewie wanting a Michelin star, validated by a tire company, is pure Stewie, always aiming for the highest possible accolades, even in a niche field like pizza. It's a funny way to satirize the pursuit of fame and critical acclaim. And the airline's reason for the press tour, they needed a distraction after that toilet flush sucked in a baby. This is a darkly hilarious callback to a previous, likely fictional, scandal of theirs. It highlights the show's tendency to build its own lore and past controversies, making the universe feel more interconnected and comically corrupt. It's a joke that rewards longtime viewers by reminding them of past absurdities. Finally, the Dave Portnoy mention. For anyone familiar with the Barstool Sports pizza reviews, this is a huge deal. Portnoy is known as a pizza kingmaker. Stewie's ambition to get his restaurant noticed by him shows a keen understanding of modern internet influence and how quickly a place can become famous.
The fear of him wanting it extra crispy is a specific Portnoyism, showing the writers did their homework on the reference. It's a detail that grounds Stewie's ambitious subplot in a recognizable real-world phenomenon. Okay, let's play the what-if game, the writer's room equivalent of throwing darts at a board. First, Peter's screen time plot. What if, instead of just fantasizing about landing a plane, he actually tried to physically escape his house to get to a TV? Imagine Peter trying to hotwire a car or bribing Cleveland to drive him to a sports bar, all while Lois is tracking him via his phone. That would have leaned into his constant rebellion against any form of authority or restriction, making the screen time issue a much more active and chaotic Peter Griffin adventure, rather than a passive fantasy. It would have amplified his desperation and the comedic chase elements. Second, Brian's flight school choice. Instead of Huffman Aviation with its 9/11 association, what if he chose a completely mundane, almost ridiculously cheerful flight school, like Happy Landings Pilot Academy, run by a perpetually smiling, overly enthusiastic instructor who uses only positive affirmations? The humor would come from Brian's perpetual cynicism clashing with this relentlessly cheerful environment, and the eventual realization that even this happy place has its own brand of weirdness. It would have been a subtler commentary on Brian's inability to find genuine happiness or satisfaction, even in seemingly idyllic settings. It would have undercut the shock value of the 9/11 reference and replaced it with a more character-driven comedic conflict. And third, Quagmire's press tour humiliation. Instead of the airline ad being the primary vehicle for his shame, what if the press tour itself was designed as a series of increasingly humiliating challenges that played on his worst traits, not just the sink incident? Imagine him having to do a segment on a family values show, or a cooking competition where his only skill is, well, This would have put him in direct conflict with his own persona, forcing him to confront his flaws in front of a wider audience and making the eventual fallout even more personally devastating, rather than relying on a single, albeit hilarious, advertisement. It would have given him more agency in his downfall, making it a more earned and tragicomic arc. All right, the verdict. I'm giving this episode a 6.8 out of 10. The 0.8 comes from the sheer audacity of the Quagmire sink incident and the ensuing Airbrine ad.
That was pure, unadulterated Family Guy brilliance. However, the 0.6 is from the uneven pacing, the somewhat disconnected plot threads, and the fact that Brian's storyline, while dramatic, felt a little predictable for his character. The pizza subplot with Stewie was fun, a solid B-plot, but it didn't quite lift the entire episode. This episode is really for the die-hard Family Guy fans, the ones who appreciate the show's ability to shock and to bring back old gags in new, horrifying ways. It's for viewers who are happy to see Brian and Quagmire in outlandish situations, and who don't mind a bit of gross-out humor. People who are looking for deep character development or tightly woven narratives might find this episode a bit frustrating. What would have pushed the score higher? A more integrated Peter and Lois plotline that actually impacted the main story, or perhaps a more surprising twist on Brian's flight school ambitions than the 9/11 callback, as shocking as it was. It's not an episode that will be remembered as a classic, but it's a solid entry that delivers the expected Family Guy fare. It's a decent flight, but not exactly first class. And so, we return to the chaotic world of the Griffins, a world where screen time limits lead to elaborate fantasies, and a simple flight simulator game can unravel friendships and careers. This episode, much like Brian's landing, was a bit bumpy, a little shaky, but it ultimately landed somewhere. It might not have been the most comfortable landing, and the baggage claim was certainly memorable, but for a show that's been flying this long, sometimes just getting to the destination is an accomplishment in itself. The journey, as always, was the Family Guy way. Unpredictable, hilarious, and utterly unforgettable. We saw how aspirations can soar, and how sometimes the best intentions can lead to the most embarrassing landings. It's a testament to the show's enduring ability to find humor in the most absurd and often uncomfortable places, proving that even when they're not at their absolute best, they're still capable of delivering moments that stick with you, like that lingering smell after a, well, you know.